So last month we finished up the first proper story of Enterprise's final season, the Augment Trilogy, and now we're getting near the end. It again begins with the Klingons, and again things look grim. A guy is dragged in, slammed into a chair, and against his will, they hook an IV up to him that looks like it's a fluid reservoir they pulled straight out of an old car. I'm not sure if they're making certain his brake fluid is topped off or what, but I doubt he's emerging from this healthy. And that's just his reaction to seeing the bill. After the titles, we see Enterprise again returning to Earth, though this time it's not because of Xindi invaders or time-traveling space Nazis. No, it's to be on hand for the launch of the NX-02, the Columbia, with a new captain, new crew, but an old chief engineer. Tucker is transferring to the ship. It's not a step up, so T'Pol is naturally wondering why he's doing this. Even Tucker usually has a reason for doing something, even if that reason usually is, I finished my six-pack and it seemed like a good idea at the time. She finally asks if it's about her.
This may come as a shock, but not everything in my life revolves around you.
What's funny is, he sounds like a dick, but I still prefer this dick to Tucker as Season 1 dick. This gets the Periscope Blue Ribbon Dick seal of approval. Down on Earth's surface, Hoshi and Phlox are taking a stroll after dinner when they get jumped by some thugs. Hoshi and Phlox resist, but she's a comm officer, and the only time he's seen the Enterprise gym is when he mistook it for an amusement park. So she's down for the count as they haul him off. We pick up with her talking to security, now doing an investigation into what happened, whereas pointed out that the last time he was here, Phlox also wound up in a fight with someone. Quite a popular guy, isn't he? That was a case of anti-alien bigotry by a drunk, though, and Reed points out that's not exactly your go-to description for criminal mastermind. Generally, the best thing they can manage is peeing in the window of a squad car. While they're looking into that, Tucker is telling his new crew what he wants from them, but some guy insists on questioning him because of the specs.
I've spent the last 3.5 years crawling inside one of these engines. I know what I'm talking about. Aye, sir.
Aye, sir. Yeah, you better aye, sir. What an embarrassment. I don't expect to ever see you captaining your own ship. Speaking of captains, Hernandez stops by wondering why Tucker didn't bother checking in with her when he came aboard. He just wanted to be able to stop by engineering first and get a lay of the land, he says, see if there's anything to complain about. That seems to be how he spends the first couple of years on any new ship. So while he's crawling up the warp core's asshole, we see Archer pacing with worry over Phlox, so desperate that he calls T'Pol in for a rather weird request for what he wants her to do with Hoshi. I mean, a mind meld. Though I'm sure he's open to any other weird things the two might want to do together if they feel like, experimenting. Meanwhile, Reed is checking through the satellite system to see if there's any sign of what happened to Phlox. There was the possibility that a transporter was used. Well, the data is mysteriously missing from that time frame. The grid down for maintenance right in the middle of the kidnapping. What a tough, completely non-suspicious break, huh? He gets a phone call from Captain Shady Man wanting to set up a meeting, and it seems that Reed knows this guy, that they have even worked together.
There's a job that needs doing, Lieutenant. And it may be the only way to save your friend's life.
So what's the mission? Should I check my email later for it or something? Okay. Well, it's back to the mind meld then. Archer's on hand to provide guidance, as hard as that might be to believe. So, eventually the meld succeeds, allowing T'Pol and Hoshi to relive the attack and note what happened, including one of the attackers speaking Rigelian as they haul Phlox away. A check shows the likely ship. It filed a false flight plan. So while Enterprise follows, we check in on Phlox, who's brought to that room with the medical experimentation from the beginning. It's a lab in a Klingon colony where he's been brought to work with Dr. Antak to try to help him succeed with his medical project. And I'd say the first step might be to clean the lab. I mean, forget sterile. The only thing that's keeping the germs off the instruments is the grime makes it too slippery for them to hang on. Phlox is going to be in charge, with Antak assisting him, which he's quite honored for. Antak, not Phlox. Phlox is incredibly bitter. As well he should be. Look at this. There's not a single eel or bat in this entire room. And you call yourself a doctor. The reason is that there's some kind of plague sweeping through Klingon space, threatening to wipe them out. They would have asked for help, but to do so would look weak. And when it's fear of Klingons that keeps the subjugated in line, that'd be a mistake. No. Better to kidnap one doctor and hope you work out a treatment for the genocide-causing pandemic rather than have a few rebellions to have to put down. Well, Phlox isn't happy, but he's here now. He might as well get to work on a cure that he has no intention of ever giving to anybody. Yeah, I'm never going to let that go. I don't accept. It was just the one time that I patted myself on the back for letting a whole species die. Bygones, man, bygones. Enterprise is in hot pursuit of that ship, with the new chief engineer not delivering as well as Tucker used to, which allows us to shift over to Columbia to see him sitting down for dinner with his new captain. Only Tucker's not too popular. 2 of his people already want a transfer.
Quite an impression you've made, Commander. You've been aboard less than 2 days, and already some of your team want to jump ship.
And I really thought playing Florida-Georgia line nonstop would have raised their spirits. There's just no helping some people. So she turns to the question of why Tucker would want this transfer, especially after previously saying that he couldn't serve anywhere except on Enterprise, and she's not going to take BS evasion for an answer. So he says that he was too comfortable with the crew over on Enterprise, suggesting that T'Pol may have been right, despite his dickish reply. Let me mention again, though, even in moments like these, I much prefer him to the old Trip. This Trip shows both nuance and intelligence, which makes his local color behavior merely shades of his personality, rather than defining who he is as a person, as it was in the first season. If this Trip says that he can't solve basic algebra, I know he's joking. When Season 1 Trip says he can't solve basic algebra, I'm inclined to take him at his word. Anyway, in Limbo, T'Pol has a meeting with Tucker, who isn't any happier to be here than she is. I mean, you could spruce up the place. Even Purgatory probably has some decent furniture to add a little atmosphere. Speaking of atmosphere, it's gone from the ship that they're pursuing. On account of somebody punched a few holes into it. Let's take this opportunity to make note of how the music has changed here.
Is one of them Denobulan?
They're all Rigelian.
As previously discussed, what Rick Berman wanted the show to have was wallpaper music. Stuff that wasn't going to really draw your attention. Things like Ron Jones and the Best of Both Worlds, that wasn't what he wanted for the show. Now that the reins have been loosened, we're back to music providing real atmosphere for the show.
Can you tell who did this? No, sir. I'll have to bring aboard some of the debris and analyze it.
Now, this was hardly, best of both worlds, but it didn't need to be. If you constantly have that level, then you're not going to be able to hit that point when you really need to. People are going to become desensitized to it. What you need is music that adjusts depending on the circumstance, whether it's business as usual or this is something tense going on, as in the case here. It doesn't show that things are epic or intense or anything like that, but there is tension on display, and the music is backing that up. Like I mentioned previously with Geordian engineering, the right music takes the mundane and makes it seem important. But again, don't overdo it. It's a tool in your toolbox to pull out and make use of when it will make the scene better. In this case, it amplifies Reed's treachery, as you saw. The music says that things are tense, and he's deliberately withholding his readings on who is responsible and keeping Enterprise in the dark. Meanwhile, Phlox is getting more and more unhappy with this investigation. They lack the proper technology, the medical data that they have is stolen, and they bring in an infected man without the slightest concern about the fact that, he's infected. This is the 3rd worst medical research kidnapping he's ever been in. The guy is here because Phlox wanted a specimen to dissect, but this wasn't what he had in mind. Basically, a live one. So Antak is going to euthanize him.
It is more honorable to give one's life to medical research than to die for no purpose.
That choice is not ours to make.
It's his. Nice aim, Mr. Klingon, sir. It has nicely softened up the chest for when I cut into it later. Meanwhile, Reed is talking to Shady Man, who suggests that the weapon analysis be falsified. You can say it was the Orions. Anyone asks about anything, just blame it on the Orions.
Tactical alert. All hands to battle stations.
What was that?
The Orions? Oh, no, don't tell me. Tell Archer. It's a small Klingon ship, and they beam aboard to mess around with things. What is most obvious about them is that they lack the cranial ridges that Klingons are known for. It's a rather odd thing to do. I mean, do they think that they're disguising themselves or something? Going to keep a low profile by getting rid of your forehead thing, but then talk Klingon to each other. It's like if the Americans had been about two people who figured their Battlestar Galactica t-shirts would allow them to blend in. We are now perfectly camouflaged, comrade wife. One of the invaders is taken prisoner, but the rest escape, having finished whatever it was they came to do. So, while the crew of Enterprise is dealing with that, we check in on Phlox, who has to deal with a Targ in his lab now. Nice way to keep things sterile, having it pee all over everything. But despite the distraction, Phlox realizes that the virus contains augment DNA, and the pieces come together. After just 2 unarmed augments manage to take out an entire bird of prey's crew, the Klingons decide to respond with augments of their own. But because medical research wasn't a priority for them, they used the remains of some of the embryos rather than trying to develop their own. It worked, but it left the recipients more human in appearance as a result. And then, when one of the subjects caught that space flu, the augmentation became a lethal infection, hopping around infecting people, and then eventually killing them. It's a particularly weird way to die because using human DNA meant that human features were being bestowed upon the recipients of the augment process. And so as a result, those who were getting the disease were turning human and then dying. I mean, it's like if you caught a plague and all of a sudden it turned you into Topher Grace and then killed you. You'd die partly out of sheer confusion at the matter. Back on Enterprise, the black box for the destroyed ship is blank. Reed guessing that it was erased as a precaution. But T'Pol and Hoshi confirm that it was erased on Enterprise, deliberately, and by Reed. T'Pol also confirmed that it wasn't Orions that destroyed the ship, so when Reed continues to insist that it was, Archer knows that he's sabotaging this investigation, and eventually has him locked up. Reed insists that he's not working for the Klingons, though, just that there are other obligations he has. You know, oh, I would have told you about the data, but I promised to pick my brother up from the airport. So Reed is left to stew in the juices of disappointment, while Phlox is outraged at the latest setback. The cure for the disease is going to take weeks to develop, but the High Council isn't very patient. They've already started massacring the victims before it can spread any farther, and they're going on to the next colony and then the next to gradually wipe them all out before everybody gets wiped out. Apparently shooting that guy was about the most advanced medical technique that's known outside this lab. Antak thinks that there is an answer, though. If they succeed in making Klingon augments that survive, then the High Council will back off. But Phlox isn't going to make Klingon genetic supermen. If even Sung couldn't keep them under control, these yahoos aren't going to succeed at that. So the guy in charge has Phlox dragged off and beaten. Not that it'll take much effort. I mean, Phlox could get severely bruised if you threw a Nerf ball at him. Back home, Columbia is finally ready to launch, and we might need it, because Enterprise is malfunctioning. What the Klingons did was sabotage the systems with some kind of invasive computer program. The prisoner won't explain what's wrong. He's prepared to die for the Empire because he's Klingon. That's, kind of their thing. The only way to stop the ship from blowing itself up is to put their foot on the gas and, well, hope that Keanu Reeves shows up before they slow down and then explode. Are they going to make it? Well, we find out in the conclusion next time.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Away.
This is my daydream. You go away.
Excuse me, Commander. Is everything all right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
The diagnostic